You're listening to the Keep It 100 Girls Show, episode number 39. Today's episode of the Keep It 100 Girls Show is brought to you by Target. Football season is right around the corner, peeps. So celebrate by tackling Target's home sale. And you know what? Save up to 30% off their home items. Score big during Target's 50% off women's shoe event. And you know what? They're also having a 40% off denim event. For easy access, find Target's shopping link to this sale located in the show notes right on your phone. Or you can head over to ninababel.com/podcast and you're going to look for the Target shopping link located under episode number 39. Welcome back to the Keep It 100 Girl podcast. As always, thanks for joining me today for another 50 Shades of Cray Cray. I'm your host, Nina Babel, and if you're joining for the first time, I help both women and even you men out there celebrate embarrassment in their lives. Each episode represents my passion and my purpose, first of all, with just storytelling. I empower women of all ages to connect with their younger selves, celebrate embarrassment, and let those past mistakes go. Plus, you guys, it's another free week of therapy. But this is my happy place where I interview everyday people like you and me. We learn from each other, we teach each other, and I talk to you like I talk to my own girlfriends. This is where women tell the truth, nothing but the truth, even if it's totally embarrassing or super cray-cray. Remember that.
I don't think I ever had the courage to tally everything up for a while. I knew at some point we were what I like to call cash flow negative. We were bouncing checks, some bills were getting paid late, and I was like, wait a minute, there's a problem here. So I started doing the tallying and everything, and that's when I was like, okay, we might have a problem.
I was kind of living like a financial hangover, as I call it, of my 20s. I was in my 30s experiencing one of those.
One rule of my podcast is we overshare. Girly Nation, are you ready to keep it 100? Are you ready to keep it 100?
Ready to keep it 100, girl.
Oh, Nina, I keep it 100, baby.
Yes, I'm ready to keep it 100.
I'm ready to keep it 100, girl.
You know I'm going to keep it 100.
My hand is raised. How about yours? In last week's episode, you heard a collection of cray things that some mothers out there said to their daughters or didn't say. But thank goodness for girlfriends, Google, and Sex and the City, because without them all, we would have been tore up, messed up from the floor up. Today, we're talking about financial embarrassment. And you might not think there's nothing to celebrate here, but oh yeah. There is so much to tell when it comes to those financial hangovers lingering into our 30s and 40s based on the dumb-ass actions we took in our 20s. Today, you're going to meet two women. Aja's in her 30s, married with two girls. Her and her husband were $120,000 in debt, people, and they were able to conquer this in 6 years. Additionally, you're going to hear Jessica's story. She's single and in her 40s, but she paid off $56,000 in debt, y'all, in 5 years. So when it comes to financial embarrassment, this is what you're going to hear today. Shit happens. You're going to hear the kind of shit that Jessica and Aja got into. Number 2, both are going to talk about their light bulb moments. Number 3, the difference between being married versus being single and in debt. Number 4, what was their strategy, their plan of action? And you're going to want to hear that. And lastly, number 5, people, you got to learn to suck it up sometimes. So learn how they did that. So before we go any further, I think it's important to understand kind of the root of their childhood and how they grew up. Jessica is the oldest of 7 children. Growing up as a kid, she took on a bigger sense of responsibility just being the oldest child and in some cases the third parent. She became a role model for her siblings and oftentimes, you know what, she felt like she just couldn't screw up.
When I was little, I was a pretty kind of carefree, happy child. You know, I was very creative and I was very kind of carefree and happy and kind of happy-go-lucky, and I loved being around people. So that's something I always remember from my childhood. But some of the things that I also remember, I am the oldest of 7 children. So,
Wow.
and they are all of our same parents. Like, I get that question too. We all have the same mom and dad. So.
You know, it's a legit question now.
It is. And so I definitely like make sure that I tell people, yes, we had the same parents. So growing up as a kid, I took on this sense of responsibility of being the oldest child. And I became, kind of the third parent in the family, where I kind of helped my parents out and kind of took the leadership role, which in a way wasn't great for me as someone who became a perfectionist in life. Because, as a child, I was told, oh, you're a role model for the other kids. And then you just feel like you can't screw up. So it was always difficult. And I've struggled with it, and I've really started addressing it the last couple of years of my life about where some of this perfectionism, self-talk has come from.
When Jessica was a little kid, her father taught her how to read stock quotes once a day in the newspaper and even report on the performance the following day. Being from a large family, she understood what frugal meant and stretching a dollar. She always had a sense of responsibility. But you know what? That changed in her 30s when she was out on her own, living that Six in the City lifestyle until she had her oh crap moment.
When I was a little kid, my dad actually taught me how to read stock quotes in the paper.
Wow.
He was kind of trying to teach me. Yeah, I was like 9 years old, right? And this is when you got a newspaper every day. You didn't have, the internet to go on to look up your quotes on a minute-by-minute basis. You got it once a day in the morning, and you got to see how your stock or mutual fund did. So he taught me how to read those, and then each morning he would ask me how his mutual funds had done the day before. So kind of at a young age, I kind of had this interest in finance. My dad saw that. And then as I got older, just again, being in a big family, you have to be very frugal and you have to watch your dollars. My mom was really great at budgeting and stretching a dollar. So I lived with a lot of that growing up as a child.
So I asked Asia to give us some background on her financial upbringing.
What I knew about money growing up was that it was pretty much a constant source of stress. My parents always complained about it. There was never enough. And I guess if I were to kind of classify my mentality or my mindset about money, it would kind of be similar to what I heard someone say about a book. I can't remember the name of the book, but I just read it. And they were saying that there are different mindsets about money in terms of the poverty class, the middle class, and the wealthy class. And the poverty class uses money as a means for enjoyment and pleasure. So when you get money, you spend it. Middle class manages money. So making budgets and making sure money is allocated. And then the wealthy mindset is to actually use money to plan for future generations. So even though I would, classify our family as pretty much a middle class family, I would say that our mentality was somewhere in between the poverty and the middle class. In some regards, there was enough to manage and allocate. But I think for the most part, because I was raised by a single mom, it was really, wait till payday, we'll get this when payday comes. And my mom was a great provider. She actually made quite a bit of money, especially later in her career, because she was a nurse. But I just know that no one really knew what to do with money. No one knew how to make it grow or make money work for them. So I think that kind of got ingrained into my mind too. So when I got a little bit of money, that college refund check, it was spent, it was gone, it was done. So I think, that's kind of where my money mindset came from. I had a friend that I always tell her, you taught me everything I know about money. She opened a checking account at 16. I did the same thing. She got an internship. I got an internship. So I kind of copied her. She was kind of like my role model when it came to money. She was always hustling, selling something on the side. And so I would say that fortunately, she gave me a little bit of her money savvy, but, obviously you're with your parents most of the time. So again, I think I was somewhere in the middle. I don't remember anybody telling me when I grew up, this is how you invest money. This is what a brokerage account is. This is how you buy stocks, things like that. So I think that, pretty much sums up what I thought about money and, how I was able to manage it and grow it, before my big money epiphany.
Aja and her husband tallied up her debt when they were getting married. And that total debt amounted to, at the time, $30,000. And they both agreed, hey, this is manageable. And they had a plan. And then life started to happen.
We did. Yeah. So we got a budget together and I'm like, okay, you'll work a little, I'll work a little, maybe. And, I know how to do this budget thing. I was an econ major. I'm like, I can figure this out. Well, what had happened was a few months after we got married, we started to get more of his mail and notifications. And actually, it wasn't just $30,000 anymore. It was $60,000 between the two of us. And when I gave birth to my daughter, not long after we got married, and I was like, okay, I'm going to have to stay home with her. So I don't know how we're going to deal with this debt thing. So I had the bright idea, like, I'll start a business and then that'll get us out of debt. It'll make so much money. We're going to be like millionaires. And I actually end up going into another $20,000 or $30,000 in debt. And actually more, because we also financed a $30,000 car, which was kind of under my business. So that added another 60, and that brought us to the 120 number.
After having their first child, Aja decided that starting a business is the way to conquer their debt. But in fact, it was the opposite. It doubled it. And her revenue projections were all missed.
Yeah, in addition to underestimating the cost, I think I overestimated my ability to get it off the ground quicker. So my revenue projections were basically way off. It was just a bad way to start a business. I mean, it was scary and, embarrassing definitely at the time. I've since gone on to start another business that was, less costly and a lot more successful revenue-wise. But I'm glad I had the experience because, obviously I learned some things, but it still set us back financially.
Jessica was a classic shoe whore with a lifestyle of over 100 pairs of shoes in her closet, drinking Cosmos, living that Carrie Bradshaw life. Jessica describes how her debt started and even snowballed to the point of financial embarrassment.
I think basically I was living my 20s the way a lot of people my age were living their 20s. It was the days of Sex and the City on TV where, Carrie Bradshaw was buying shoes like crazy and I wanted to keep up with that. I mean, I used to have over 100 pairs of shoes.
Whoa.
I mean, I was like, yes, I had a guy friend once that was helping me move and he goes, is this it for the shoes? Because this is a lot. And so, I mean, I got caught up in that. I got caught up in the whole life. I was living in Philadelphia. I was living downtown in this great apartment. I was going out for, $10, $14 Cosmos. I mean, I wasn't thinking about what I was doing with my money. And I decided to get my MBA. And so I took out loans for that. And then I moved back to Minnesota. I'm like, well, I need a new car. And so I took out a loan for a car. So it was just all very normal things, but just not paying attention.
The reality of Aja's launch didn't go as expected.
Yeah, so in my mind, I'd be probably making $20,000 or $30,000 a month or something like that. And that, with that particular business, that never ever happened. I just thought, at minimum, I could be profitable, and I don't even know if that happened. It was mostly bills. I got an office, which I didn't need. I had other expenses like daycare. I'm like, well, I'm going to have to go to this office, 8 hours a day, and just doing it so bloated. And at the time when I did it, it was around 2005, 2006, 2007, somewhere in that time span. And the idea of working remotely in lean startup wasn't as prevalent as it is now. People are like, I'll start $1 million company for my living room. And that's just what people do. Well, back then, I think I was still, kind of on the end of that trend where, you started a business, you took out a $200,000 SBA loan, and you put on airs and you did all this stuff. Like I got furniture. No one ever came to my office. I didn't need an office. I didn't need furniture. Didn't need childcare. It was just way too bloated. Like if I were to go back and do it again, I can pinpoint all the mistakes.
Now the financial embarrassment. Aja highlights her top 3 mistakes.
It was embarrassing because I eventually had to shut everything down, and people would be like, what happened to your office and your business? And I'm like, it went away. So in terms of the 3 mistakes I made, I would say, getting too much, like being too concerned with like the administrative stuff. Like a lot of people, and I see people make this same mistake. I made it. You fall in love with this idea, like I'm going to have a website and business cards and a logo, and people end up spending so much money on that stuff. And not so much now, because a lot of things you can really build from the ground up pretty easily and do DIY. I always say it wrong. My daughter's like, you're saying it wrong, but you can do it yourself. But people get so enamored with the idea of being a business owner, they don't really take time out to see if their idea is feasible, if it's viable enough to actually make money. So make sure you start super bare bones to get that MVP, that minimally viable product. If you need a website, don't spend $300 or $400 or I don't know what they cost now because I do it myself these days. That's how easy it is. But back in the day, you spend, I don't know, $3,000 for a website.
Yep.
And you don't even know if you have a good idea.
Exactly.
These days, throw up a Wix page, collect email addresses. That's your first step to your business. Save yourself the pain.
Mistake number 2.
If you can avoid it, don't use credit cards. Like I think that was a big mistake, hedging my bets with credit, borrowing, and I really didn't have a solid plan or projection to make money back. So I would say if you can bootstrap it, totally do that. The way things are set up now, bootstrapping is totally an option. You don't need to borrow your way into big bucks.
Mistake number 3.
The next thing is know when to shut something down. Like I just kept going. I renewed my lease. I wasn't getting the point. I was like, no, I'm going to make this successful. Winners never quit, quitters never win. And so you just have to know when to call it.
The stuff no one tells freshmen. When we are in our 20s, we are at a very vulnerable state in our lives. The Keep It 100 Girl podcast will be launching an HBCU welcome week for college female freshmen starting 8/22. Use these college life hacks from HBCU alum starting from day 1 of college and beyond. The Keep It 100 Girl podcast is launching an HBCU welcome week series for college female freshmen starting 8/22. Listen on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, and TuneIn Radio. Visit bit.ly/HBCU series to learn more.
The light bulb moment. When we all realize we're fighting to keep the lights on. Are you really living life, or are you just paying bills until you die? Both Aja and Jessica describe their light bulb moments.
So I think the alarm went off when one time we were renting a house in a nice swanky suburb, and my husband went to drop off the rent, and it had totally depleted us. And I'm like, what's going on? We both work. We're college educated. We have some scruples about ourselves. What's going on? Why is this so hard for us? And I think, at that point, I'm like, let me just do a retally because some things have changed since the last time I looked at our total debt number. And when I did that, I figured out the problem. We were just in way too much debt. So that was like our light bulb moment. And I was like, babe, we got to do something. We got to pray, take communion, seek the Lord's face. It was really a come to Jesus moment. Like literally we went to Jesus, like, what do we do, Jesus?
I would never go in and balance because it's just like, I didn't like doing the routine of it. Like the administrative part of it just like pained me to no end. And it caught up with me. It definitely caught up with me in my early 30s. And I remember watching my grandmother, those same grandparents. I was watching my grandmother balance her checkbook, and she was always meticulous about her checkbook. Like if it was off a few pennies, she went berserk finding them. And I just thought of all the stories of my grandparents of when they came over to the United States from Cuba in the 60s, in the early 60s, and how they had to start over at zero in their late 30s, and they had to learn a new language. They couldn't do the jobs that they had back in Cuba because all of your certifications and everything were basically torn up. They didn't give that to you to take with you. You weren't allowed to bring it with you.
Right.
So, and hearing their struggles, like hearing how my grandparents paid off $55,000 of their mortgage in 1 year. Like, I was thinking about all of that as I was looking at her, and I'm like, I can't believe I am wasting an opportunity that was handed to me by them coming to the United States and me being able to be born here and have the opportunities I've had. I can't waste it. I have got to get my act together. And that's really what kind of catapulted me into really, getting honest with myself about how much debt I really had.
Facing your fears and telling the numbers identified the monster and how they're going to eliminate their own debt. Funny and ironic how we are subject matter experts with financial type degrees to help our clients, to support Fortune 500 companies, but we struggle with our own mess.
We knew there was a problem. Like, there was a reason that, checks were bouncing. I would be up at night, like, I know I got a check out there. And again, this is back in the day. People will probably listen, like, what's a check? Like, any younger kid, like, what do you do with a check? But back in the day, I'm not going to explain it, but anyway, I'd be like, man, I know there's a check out there. Is it going to cash tonight while I'm asleep and we won't have enough? And so I think probably the biggest fear was just looking like a jerk that couldn't manage my money. Again, college educated in, economics. I should know better. I had business internships since I was in high school. I'm like, I should know better.
Like, you were the poster girl for money, right?
Yeah, I was money. Yeah, I should have been money. And yet it was like slipping through our hands.
So Jessica is an expert in her field. She's an accountant with an MBA. She has a good job. She makes good money. But she felt like she wasn't making any financial traction in her life.
I realized I was completely careless in my spending. I wasn't thinking about or planning about my money. And here I am, an accountant. I mean, you want to talk about something embarrassing. I was an accountant and I didn't feel like I had my money together.
After tallying the numbers, Jessica realized, you know what? It was the overspending in her 20s, the interest on interest of Cosmos adding up, and living a treat yourself life that ended up as being her monster.
Well, it was the MBA loan, so that was about $29,000. Part of it had been paid by an employer, but then they decided to stop reimbursing me for, it was a smaller company, reimbursing me for my MBA. So I was kind of stuck in the middle of my program and had, wanted to finish. So I just started signing on for student loans, not thinking about what the repercussions would be down the line. And then when I left Philadelphia after I had graduated, I went back to Minnesota and I got a car, ended up getting in a car accident with that car where it was totaled.
Oh.
And then the money I received from the car from the insurance company, I paid off the loan that was left on the car. I still had some residual money left. So part of it I used to pay off credit cards, but then I just used the next as a down payment on the next car. So I just kind of kept myself in the cycle of, having a car payment. And then the $14,000 in credit cards, besides shoes, I really could not tell you what I spent it on, which is very sad that I can't even account for it. And I will tell you that $14,000 was not the highest amount I had ever had on credit cards either.
Yeah. Wow.
I just spent beyond control. Like I think being single and living on my own, I kind of wanted to do a treat yourself kind of thing where I was just like, if someone's like, hey, let's go travel to this. Okay, sure. Let's go. I'll put it on the credit card or stuff for my home or going. I'm sure some of that is interest on interest of drinks going out on Friday nights too. Because I just was not paying attention to my monthly budget. I know I was overspending in my 20s. For sure, I had to be if I was supplementing it with my credit card.
Letting people find out what you're pretending to be. Sound familiar? That's the world we live in, right? People using their representative, whether it's when they're dating, social media, or just to keep up with the Joneses, was something Aja totally identified with.
The other part about it is I think I overestimated how alone we were in that, because now that I talk about my story and tell other people, they're like, oh my goodness, we're living that right now. But everybody around us look normal. Everybody was doing everything. And, I'd be looking at them like they have it all together. And I think there's just this collective idea that, if you don't say anything, nobody will know the pain that you're experiencing. We weren't destitute. We weren't living on the street. We're actually living pretty regularly, but it was just painful for me because, I felt like we should have been doing better. So in terms of that was the question. What was the fear? Letting people find out that I wasn't who I was pretending to be.
Strategy. What's the best approach and strategy for married couples in a similar situation to Aja?
But I just knew I couldn't live my life suffocating under just the burden of debt, especially with kids. Like, I want to spend time with them, be home with them.
The single woman strategy. Jessica was disgusted with herself, but she had a plan, and it was just a matter of executing the plan.
I knew there was something just not sitting right with my finances, and I was getting frustrated, and really watching her and knowing everything that they had gone through coming here to the United States, I was a little disgusted with myself. Like, I knew that I was in debt, and and until I actually sat down and calculated, I didn't know how much it was. And then I felt a little sick to my stomach. Like, how am I going to attack this? Like, I actually remember feeling like I'm never going to get this paid off ever. And again, it was a little embarrassing because being an accountant, most accountants are stereotypically known for watching their, money and being very prudent with their spending. And I will tell you, I knew how to create a budget. I was horrible at executing it.
You're going to be paying a lot of money back in student loans. Don't feel embarrassed about having to go live with mom, live with dad for a few years to get that straightened out. Or else you'll be 30 or 40 having to move back with them, and that's even more embarrassing. The advice would be, because sometimes it does happen that one person is totally against, financial, transformation or whatever. That does happen. So I would say if you're in that situation where one of your spouse, one half of the marriage is like, or that person is like, I'm not with this. This is stupid. You'll just have to lead by example. So whatever you have authority over in your household, if you've got a fancy purse that you can sell to pay down a credit card bill, do that. It might be painful, or maybe you have some electronics or that you can, sell, or maybe you can opt to cut off one of your favorite subscription boxes or something like that. I would just say lead by example. And once you start having those testimonials like, babe, I paid off my, Citibank card today or whatever, that's going to make an impact more than your words. So you can't really nag someone to death. You can just lead by example.
Conquering small wins psychologically works.
I want to say we had everything in each other's name besides our student loans. So based on the plan that we followed, you just went from your loans smallest to large, your debts from smallest to largest. So sometimes, depending on what we paid off, it'd be his student loan we're working on, and sometimes it'd be my business credit card. But other than that, everything else was in both of our names. So it was like all the money would go in the pot, and whatever was on deck to get paid off that month is what we paid off according to the schedule we had made up.
Jessica's execution plan was similar to Aja's with respect to the Dave Ramsey's book, The Total Money Makeover. Both of them used this as their model, as their strategy for executing their plan.
The debt snowball is designed to modify your behavior with money.
So something had to kind of change internally inside of me, because it couldn't just be, okay, let's create a budget and follow it. Because like with budgets or with weight loss or anything that you're trying to make a change, it has to really come from within than just the actual plan that you're going to do. You actually have to want to follow through. So it was very strange because at the same time, my best friend and her husband were taking Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University at their church. And she was telling me about this Dave Ramsey guy. And I was like, maybe I should check him out and take it. And she was all excited about it. And she and her husband's definitely more the financial nerd. She is not. And to hear her be excited about going to a class on finances, that intrigued me. So I looked into it. I actually got registered for a class that started a few weeks later. But in the meantime, I went and bought one of his books, The Total Money Makeover, and read that in like 2 days. And I was on fire. I was like ready to go. That was like the emotional energy that I needed to get started on attacking this debt. Wow. And so in conjunction with that book and with the class, I learned this debt snowball method of paying off my debt, where you list your debts from smallest to largest. You pay minimums on all of your debts, and you attack that little one with every dollar that you have left over in your budget. So it does require you to create a budget, but then it forces you to say, okay, whatever money you have left over, you're attacking that little small debt. And that really gave me the behavioral change, because you get those small wins by paying off those little debts first.
Right.
And that's what really got me started on that path.
But if you get that book, Total Money Makeover, it'll kind of explain that, and it's what worked for us.
An aggressive payoff period and moving back home to live with her mother, you know what? She sucked it up because that became the next strategy. It's funny how life comes back full circle.
We lived with her. She didn't charge us rent. She's a great lady. So we were just paying down debt, just crazy paying off debt, crazy paying money. I mean, it felt so good. I'm not going to lie. And then while we were there, we got a phone call from a relative who was like, hey, I inherited this house. I think you all might be the only ones around who would appreciate this opportunity, but you're going to have to fix it up and all this stuff. And we're like, okay, but the house is in Inglewood, Chicago. We're like, oh, thanks, but no thanks. All right, talk to you later.
It started working. She was on fire. Jessica was happy with her progress. And then life happened.
In that first year, in 2010, I had paid off 26,000 of the 56. So I was really on fire to get everything paid off. And then life kind of took a turn after that.
Okay, what happened?
So in 2011, those same grandparents that, had inspired me to get out of debt were having some major health issues. So that's when, we were doing a round robin of traveling to Florida, my mom and my aunt and I. And I finally said, you know what, I'm going to move down there until we can figure out what's going to happen with their long-term, care, like what we're going to do. So I moved in with them. I didn't resign from my job. I converted over to being a contractor so that I was working for them, but only on certain projects. But I was also trying to manage being a caregiver and dealing with all the medicines they had and just all that goes into caregiving. And then the contracting job started drying up, and suddenly the hours were gone. And I had no income. I'm living with my grandparents, dealing with all the emotions that come with that. And at that point, the Florida real estate market, the whole economy really hadn't recovered yet, even the real estate market, but the economy as a whole in South Florida hadn't recovered still from the recession. So I had a really hard time finding work, so much so that I ended up getting behind in my mortgage on my home back up in Minnesota. And that led it to go into foreclosure, and I ended up, it ended up being sold at a sheriff's sale the next March. So that was really tough. That was very embarrassing to have foreclosure. And I know there were a lot of people that were going through foreclosure at the time, but I never thought it would happen to me, especially someone who had gotten their financial, game together. And especially after I had bragged about how much I had paid off and, I had paid off $26,000, go me, and then to have to tell people, oh, yeah, guess what? I don't have a job now, and now my house is in foreclosure. And I had originally purchased that home at $109,500 at the top of the market in 2005, and it sold at the sheriff's sale for $35,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there was just no way I was going to even be able to sell it. So I just said, you know what, I'm just going to have to, I had to decide whether or not to make a car payment, which I needed the car to be able to go on interviews to find a job, right, or to make the mortgage payment. And so I obviously chose the car because I still had debt at the time.
She sucked it up. Resetting after this experience taught Jessica to revert to her goal-oriented self. From 2010 to 2015, you know what? She did it.
About 2 years later, I had a friend on Facebook that posted a challenge and said, what do you want to accomplish in the next 5 years? And I thought to myself, and my goal-oriented self kind of got stirred up again. I'm like, I need to finally finish paying off that debt. Like, it needs to be gone. And at that point, I had only had student loans left. And so I went like a mad woman and I went crazy to pay it off. And so March of 2015, I finally paid it all off.
Jessica shares her top hacks for living a minimalist mantra life. And she believes this is what will curtail your spending.
A lot of the kind of hacks that I use in my life, I try to offer as suggestions. And what I strive to tell people, or my coaching clients, I always tell them, these may work for you, they may not. It depends on, it's kind of like diet plan. Like one diet plan may work for somebody and another one may work for another one. It's whatever kind of gets you motivated. So one of the big things I always tell my clients to do is to automate as much of your spending, like your payments that you make, online. So like I have pretty much anything and everything that I can have auto paid out of my bank account on auto pay. So that when I'm on vacation or if I can't get to a computer to pay something, I remember the days where I was physically paying with checks. that's how far, that's when I go back to.
Yeah.
But I try to automate everything that I possibly can so that I don't have to think about it. And your budget almost becomes on autopilot that way. The other thing that I tell my clients to do, that if you're having a really hard time reining in some of your spending on some of the big key areas like clothing, eating out, your groceries, kind of household items, I will tell them that for, maybe for a few weeks, what you do with your budget is you actually go to the ATM and pull it out in cash and pay for everything like your groceries, eating out in cash. And you will quickly find how fast that money goes. So that you're on a cash budget for those items. So you're really only spending what you have. And that can be very eye-opening for people to see what they're actually spending versus what they think they're spending.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a super big eye-opener. It's very important to rein in. The other thing I tell people, or I tell my women that I'm coaching is, if you're thinking about making a larger purchase, whether it be furniture or a car or whatever, make sure you do your research. Make sure that you think about it and don't impulsively spend on bigger items. As well as smaller things, but especially on bigger items. Make sure you're taking the time to think through, do I need this? Is it going to make my life better? I think sometimes we get in this mentality that if we have more, our life is better, and I'm finding quite the opposite.
Me too.
So I'm kind of going through my own minimalist journey right now of getting rid of things, and I'm finding myself a lot happier with less stuff. And I think if you kind of practice that mantra of, validating whether or not something is really going to bring, usefulness or happiness to your life, it can really curtail a lot of the spending that we do.
Learn what women are thinking, but not saying out loud. On this podcast, Nina chats about socially awkward real-life moments and sensitive girly stuff most girlfriends talk about on a daily basis. Think of Nina as your go-to girlfriend.
Aja and her husband were paying bills like crazy. But they wanted the life of financial freedom. And it meant one thing, though. Moving back in with mom.
Oh my goodness. So that's funny because I actually left her house when I was like 16. We just could not get along. And then I came back, after the whole we can't pay rent anymore fiasco. And she let us live with her. Oh, she actually lived with us for a year. And then she moved out. And I was like, okay, we're still broke. We still need help. And so she let us move in for like a year and a half. It was about a year and a half. And, a lot of people are like, I couldn't do that. And that's, again, another, if we're talking about embarrassment, nothing more embarrassing. Like I'm moving back home with my mama. Not just me, but my family, my husband, my child. Like our whole family is going to move in with mama.
The light bulb was all of a sudden getting brighter.
You want to look like you are progressing with your peers, not going backwards. But it's so funny because when we did that, we knew some other people that they moved in with their parents.
Oh.
We were telling them, like, man, we are paying bills like crazy. This is awesome. And people were like, I couldn't do that. I just don't get along with my mother. But if the financial pressure is there enough, you will do what you have to do. Like I was determined to make peace with her, be at peace with her. And we, I think when my attitude changed, like, hey, I'm no longer like a stank attitude teenager trying to, assert my will on everyone. I am a humble 30-something-year-old that really needs help, and I need to pay my bills. Mommy, please help. And I think that made the difference too. Again, my mom's a great lady. So I would say if you're out there on the cusp and you have to do something embarrassing to get your finances in order, do it, man, because there's nothing like living a life of financial freedom. So it looks like you're taking a step back, but you're really taking a step forward.
Aja and her husband sucked it up one more time. But you know what? A free house meant moving to the inner city, what Aja calls the ghetto. This was a totally unplanned opportunity that just dropped from the sky. And she said no at first.
That was embarrassing to tell people that, hey, we no longer live in these swanky suburbs. We are actually moving to ground zero of abject poverty to raise our family. Like that's the last choice that we had.
From Homewood to Inglewood, she was asking her husband, why did they do this?
I was like, this will be life-changing for us if we did this. So we prayed and prayed, and we finally said yes. And it just so happened that we did have the cash to do the renovations. Because again, we're still like, we've sworn off debt, no debt for nothing. Yeah. And so we actually had the cash to like fix up some things and move in. And so we did it. It took us a year to clean everything out, to fix it up. Because again, we're using cash. We moved in. I remember the first day we moved in, my youngest daughter had just turned 1. She was exactly 1 year old. And the noise was incredible. Dogs barking, people fighting in the alley, sirens all throughout the night. And I looked at my husband and I was like, why did we do this? I don't understand. Why did we agree to this? This is stupid. This is stupid. It was embarrassing at the time, like telling people like, yeah, we're moving to Inglewood. People are like, what? I remember going into the store and I was, I think I was writing a check. Again, I was still writing checks at this time, and someone saw my license said, Chicago, and from the zip code, they could tell the neighborhood I was from. And then the check still said the suburb. And they're like, how did you go from Homewood to Inglewood? Like, why would you do that? And I'm like, you know what? I'm at the cash register. You don't have time to hear the story, but it's one of the best things we ever did. So yeah, it was hard, but we got through it and we're still here. And to this day, I'm so glad that we did it. If anyone has ever heard of the movie Chirac, Spike Lee wrote and directed, I believe it. He wrote and directed it. It was filmed pretty much in the neighborhood where I live. It's about the neighborhood of Inglewood, Chicago. Inglewood has made national news for the crime rates, the homicide, highest statistics in any terrible category that you can imagine, from birth rate mortality to diabetes to childhood obesity to HIV. I mean, just highest across, not just in Chicago, but across the nation. Okay, so I don't know if that helps. We're talking the poorest of the poor, quote unquote, worst of the worst. And I say all this stuff in quotes because I'm in love with my neighborhood now. I love where I live now. But when we were moving here, we were like, this is the stupidest thing anyone has ever considered to, like, why? Again, we are working. I mean, we work, we're college educated. We don't have to do this, but we did. Like, we didn't have any other choices. It was either try to keep up with the Joneses and suffocate for the rest of our lives, or at least try it. The thing about us is that if we moved to the inner city and it went terribly wrong, we at least would at some point have the means to move out and get a mortgage and all that stuff. But we're still here. We haven't left because it's actually one of the best decisions we ever made.
Aja and her husband started their debt-free quest in 2010, and it took them 6 years to eliminate all of the $120,000.
Yeah, that's where the numbers always the numbers, the timetables get a little murky, because there were times where we were paying off debt and then we actually took on more debt, which was so stupid. But I would say, like, after 2008, we stopped taking on all debt and being, like, really serious about getting out of debt. So maybe 2010. Because, like, in 2010, we had, like, a really small couple of debts that we took on, like, no more than a couple thousand. But I would say, like, 2008, we were done. We weren't financing cars or anything. So I would say from 2008 to 2013, so about 5 years being super aggressive, it took us to pay off that amount of debt. Yeah, and during that time, we were cash flowing a lot of things. Like, my kids went to private school, which was like $30,000. We had home renovations to get to the house. We had to do that. We actually did buy a couple of cars cash. So we probably could have been done faster, but because of our commitment to not taking out debt, there were other, like, life events that kind of interrupted our debt payoff plan a little bit. But we forged through it. And then I never really worked full time. It was usually like side hustling from home. Because I kind of stayed home with the kids. Sometimes they were in private school for a couple of years, but eventually we just went back to homeschooling. So yeah, just life happens, and life is going to happen, and it might take you longer, but I just say keep going with it anyway.
Aja and Jessica adjusted. There's nothing like a big sigh of relief when it comes to financial freedom.
We adjusted. It's still really loud around here, but we don't notice it anymore. We're used to the sirens and dogs barking. But we took that extra money that we had available, through not having mortgage or rent, and totally demolished our debt. We paid off all of our debt in 2013 and are totally debt-free. We owe no man nothing but to love him. And life is awesome. Like, I can't recommend this to anyone enough. Like, I get to homeschool my kids. We get to travel quite a bit. I get to be around for friends and family, in the middle of the day, because I don't have to work that much, because we don't have bills, like the average person does.
You had a lot of life thrown at you at once. You need to give yourself a little bit of grace that you came back and actually finished it too. Like, give yourself a pat on the back for doing that, because I think often we celebrate people who get things done in a record time, or like these amazing, time spans, when we don't honor, like, what people have gone through to get there as well.
Don't forget to give yourself a pat on the back. This is embarrassment worth celebrating, people.
And that's what I tell my clients when I coach them. I said, look, you need to do this in a way where you feel like you're getting a lot of progress done, but you don't feel like you're so burned out that you're just going to quit. It's like weight loss. It's like sometimes if you try to go way too hard on the weight loss, you'll end up burning out after 3 or 4 weeks and then give up, and then you're back to eating all kinds of pizza and ice cream and whatever.
Aja breaks the cycle by starting the financial conversations early with her daughters.
This summer, we're studying investing. So I'm able to show them like what it means to have a budget, not go over your budget, how to pick stocks based on, a PE ratio and the financials and the gross margin and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to be that much more involved. And on top of it, we have the conversation like, hey, if you want to go to college, let's not do loans. Let's save now. We put up money. They have several bank accounts. They can look and see how it grows. So those are some of the things on the financial side. And they complain. I'm not going to make it seem like somebody might be listening like, oh, she's the perfect mom. No. They yell, they scream, they have tantrums, they fall out. They're like, I want to spend all of my money. This is stupid. Why would I need to save it? So that happens too. But, you have to push past that when you have kids. They obviously can't see the long term. They have a very myopic view of what's needed for life. And you just have to push past that and still guide them the best that you can. So those are kind of some of the things that we're doing money-wise.
Jessica, through her financial coaching, advises parents of daughters to have those conversations early.
I think conversations have to happen as a kid. I mean, and I'm not a parent, so I can't really speak to that as much, but I would encourage parents to be talking to their kids about money openly and honestly from as a little kid, all the way up and through high school until they leave home. I mean, that has to be something that's ingrained and taught at the beginning. It doesn't always mean it's going to stick with them because they may have outside influences that try to tempt them to do, to make bad choices with money, but at least you've done your part to kind of educate them on what's going on.
And that wraps up another episode of the Keep It 100 Girls Show. We celebrate embarrassment, and I might suggest things that make you guys say, have you friggin' lost your mind? But the fact that you all are open and honest every week is a true testament of Keep It 100 and what it really means. Every week, I reveal our tell-all experiences, our aha moments, advice, embarrassment, and lastly, mother friggin' knowledge. I'm here to empower you every week and give you that weekly dose of self-confidence so you guys realize your worth. New episodes of the Keep It 100 Girls Show, they drop every Tuesday on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, and now iHeartRadio. Before you go, just give me some love, Girly Nation, on iTunes or Stitcher. It's really easy. If you like this episode or any others, kindly leave me a rating and 5-star review. I rely on it. And you know why? Because it helps me stand out from the crowd. It helps me, it helps women, and even you men understand us and themselves better. The strongest actions and goals for you to make for yourself is to become so financially secure that you forget that it's payday. That is what I want you to take away from today's episode. Enjoy your Tuesday and tune in this Friday for the Keep It 100 moment. Don't forget, it's a 5-minute moment where I vent, maybe I share a lesson, I share a real 100 moment that took place in my life or yours. But remember, I keep it real, I keep it true. Smooches!